Good evening. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Town of Superior Board of Trustees for Monday, April 22nd. Could we all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Phyllis, could we have the roll call, please?
Mayor Clint Folsom.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Mark Lasis.
Here.
Sandy Hammerling. Here. Ken Lish.
Here.
Kevin Ryan.
Here.
Neil Shaw.
Here.
Laura Skwazinski.
Here.
Town Manager Matt Magley.
Here.
Town Attorney Kendrick Carberry.
Here.
Town Clerk Phyllis Harden here.
Thank you. Next is the approval of the agenda. Are there any items on the agenda the board members would like to pull or change?
Yes, I'd like to pull 3C.
3C?
Thank you.
Okay. Any additional changes? All right, seeing none, entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Motion by Trustee Ryan, second by Trustee Lish. All those in favor? Okay, passes unanimous. All right, next is reports, questions and issues. Who'd like to start? Ken.
So I'll knock out all the ones that I think we'll all probably share. We had a board retreat last Monday, the 15th. Had lots of good topics and discussion there. We then had a town board / planning commission work session on the 18th, where we discussed both the Northwest area plan as well as their work plan for the year. And then in addition to those, I attended the ACES meeting on the 11th of April, and I met with a representative from Coal Creek Meals on Wheels on the 17th. And that is all.
Sure. So at our board retreat last week, we discussed at length my personal blog. I just wanted to ensure the rest of the board knows that I'm taking the feedback to heart. I'm going to do my best to limit the information I share to not represent everyone else's positions and focus more on my own content. That's all.
Thanks, Kev.
Sure, it's been a busy couple of weeks, as I'm sure others will report. I'm going to take my time to talk about a health and safety risk in all of our homes. Imagine if we had firearms loaded in your kitchen, a mere grasp away from our children who would often be left at home, our teen children. It'd be a terrible idea, and I'm sure you would get a visit from the sheriff's office to say that's a terrible idea. We have other weapons in our house or something that has been weaponized, and that's your unused pharmaceuticals. Please do not leave your unused pharmaceuticals in the kitchen. 80% of the opioid abuse that occurs in the United States today, people are accessing the unused pharmaceuticals that are in our homes. So to that effect, the Boulder County residents can drop off these unwanted prescription medications at drug collection events this Saturday, the 27th, from 10 to 2. The service is free and anonymous. No questions will be asked. Bring your pills, patches, small amounts of liquid medication, any amounts of liquid. I'm going to delete the small, any amounts of liquid medication, your barrels of liquid medication, if that happens to be what you have, for safe disposal. Items not accepted at our collection site will be syringes, inhalers, and chemotherapy drugs, but the Boulder County Sheriff will allow those things to be dropped off. At the Superior Substation, which is right around the corner, 405 Center Drive, Unit F, there is sometimes some confusion amongst our residents where thinking that the Boulder County Substation is the firehouse, and so we will get in touch with the firehouse. I don't see the chief here, so we'll send an email to the chief and just make sure that they remember that Saturday is the drug take-back day, and if they could just be prepared in the event that somebody wants to drop off, that they don't deny that, and then they could shuttle over to the sheriff's substation, which they've done in previous years.
Yeah, they'll direct them over to this location. I've had discussions with the chief in previous years, and they're not able to take them at that location, but they will make sure and direct them to the location.
Great, thank you.
All right, thanks. Mark?
Hi, good evening. So a couple months ago, we had a presentation, and there was something that went out in the Superior Sentinel about a program that Boulder County was offering free radon kits. If you wanted to sign up and get one of those free radon kits, I think Sandy Hammerly brought that up to everybody's attention. So I signed up for it, got the kit sent to my house. It was free. You send it in, mail it in, and you just put it in your basement for a couple days. And it's activated charcoal, and it registers the radon that you have. So there are still kits available. If anybody's interested, you can view the I think it was the March issue. The Superior Sentinel had the link to the radon kit that you can get from Boulder County. Everybody should get their house tested for radon. We've got radon in our soil. It's a known carcinogen, and it's just one of those things that once you know about what the radon levels are in your house, you can actually take steps to actively, mitigate the risks associated with radon. So I just encourage everybody to get informed, figure out what your house is like in terms of radon levels, get tested, and then get it mitigated. Just one upcoming item. So tomorrow night is the Broomfield City Council is going to be meeting to consider two things of interest to Superior residents. First will be a discussion, and it's not a vote yet, but it's a discussion on whether or not to go forward with spending an additional $2.5 million on the Jefferson Parkway. So right now, the Jefferson Parkway is in the planning stages. Arvada just passed a resolution in support to spend an additional $2.5 million on the Parkway. Jeffco is already on board with it, and now Broomfield is being asked to contribute an additional $2.5 million. If you are opposed to the Jefferson Parkway, Superior has historically taken a position against the Jefferson Parkway. The way that project dies is by not getting the funding from Broomfield. So I'd encourage you to write to Broomfield City Council and consider attending tomorrow night's meeting as well as their next meeting where they'll actually be discussing whether or not to move forward with the commitment. I'm planning on going tomorrow night, and I'm going to speak in opposition to spending the $2.5 million from Jefferson Parkway. In addition to that, also at the City Council meeting tomorrow, there's a request from City Councilman Mike Shelton, who is a member of the Rocky Flats Stewardship Council, along with myself, and he is requesting the City of Broomfield to join Superior in a resolution in opposition to oil and gas drilling and fracking on and under Rocky Flats. So they're not going to be considering a motion tomorrow, but they're going to be discussing whether or not to move forward with the motion in the future. But I applaud Councilman Mike Shelton for taking the lead on this issue. Town of Superior previously, at our last board meeting, adopted a resolution in support of opposing oil and gas development at Rocky Flats, and we're encouraging all members of the Rocky Flats Stewardship Council to do the same thing. So that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Neil?
One of our topics at the retreat last week that Mayor Pro Tem Laces brought up was potentially sponsoring or having the Wolfpack Ninjas come and run an event here in Superior. So Trustee Laces came to the ProStack meeting on Wednesday last week and presented it, and ProStack is generally in support of it. They are asking staff to kind of look at the calendar. 2019 looks like a hard stretch, so most likely we're looking at 2020. But staff will come back to the ProStack in the June meeting to talk about potential scheduling and when that might occur. One of the big topics in the ProStack meeting was Riverbend Park public engagement process. That's obviously on the agenda for today, so I won't cover that. And then finally, just to remind everybody, Saturday is Arbor Day, and we're going to be having the grand opening of the skate park. Along with Arbor Day, we're going to plant 4 trees. There's a new agility course now built into the dog park. You can ride the pump track. The bike track, or the bike course, has been resoiled with Silk's help. But otherwise, I hope to see a lot of people there. That's all I got. Thanks.
Sandy?
I attended the OSEC meeting on April 10th, and I want to call the board and the community's
recommendation for habitat preservation around the Hodgson-Harris Reservoir. It is posted out on the town website. OSAC's been working on this for some time. It is a very, very well done document. I believe that the chair of OSAC's going to discuss it a little bit in public comment, but I really want to congratulate OSAC on a really, really well done report. The members of the committee have really been very thoughtful in listening to the community, but also being concerned about the waterfowl, particularly who live on the Hodgson-Harris Reservoir. And I just want to call all your attention to it and encourage you to read it as soon as you can. The other thing that I wanted to comment on is that last week I attended the Budget and Finance Committee meeting of the Denver Regional Council of Governments. I'm not sure how many of you are aware, but the DRCOG's Area Council on Aging actually manages about $18 million in federal funding that comes down to the state on behalf of the 8-county service area. During that meeting, we approved $18 million in funding to more than 60 aging programs, and I can't remember the number of agencies, but I was really impressed with the work that is done by the Area Council on Aging, because they really work hard to not only make sure services are not duplicated, but also to do a careful evaluation of services that have been performed by agencies in the past. And if they're not meeting their high standards, they will eliminate them and move on to new funding. So it's kind of amazing that we don't think about all the things that DRCOG does. Most of us think about transportation-related issues, but they do have a significant impact on the seniors in our area. The other thing that happened at that meeting, we did do the first reading of the sub-regional transportation funding, and it appears that our $1.045 million will go through for the trail. So hopefully sometime soon we'll see the completion on our connection to Broomfield on the 36 bike trail. And that's all I have to report.
All right, thanks, Sandy. The summary of my past meetings is on my mayor's Facebook page, and want to reiterate what Neil said about Arbor Day. I'm looking forward to being out there for the ribbon cutting and grand opening of the skate park. I was there on Saturday at the bike park helping the Youth Leadership Council members do some work on the dirt track, and that park is just amazing. It really looks amazing. I can't wait to get my bike on it and give it a try. So it's I look forward to seeing everyone out there. And speaking of bikes, on Sunday we are going to be having kind of the first bike race of the season through Superior, or part of Superior, kind of on the down by 76th Street, the Koppenberg bike race. So if you live in that area, you might want to check out the website. There have been some announcements going out, but the details are on the town's website for that. So that is it for my announcements. Anything else? Okay, Matt?
Nothing for me.
Okay, and Phyllis. All right. That is it for our announcements. And at this time, we're on to public comment. If anyone in the public would like to make comments on agenda item, or consent agenda or non-agenda items, now is the opportunity to do that public comment. So welcome, Ryan. Yeah, just give a wave and I'll just signal you to come up next.
All right, well, good evening. Ryan Welch. I'm the current chair of the Open Space Advisory Committee, and I'd like to just follow on with what Trustee Hammerly was saying about this position paper, if you will, that we've been working on now for about a year on how we'd like to see the Hodgson-Harris Reservoir protected. I guess I'll start by just reading the recommendation. OSAC recommends the board use the recommendations for habitat preservation around Hodgson-Harris Reservoir document when considering any development applications adjacent to the reservoir. So this is a 4 or 5 page document, so obviously I can't read it all for you. And in your packet, you had our March minutes, not our April minutes. So it's in that document, it's on our website. So you'll be seeing this document come through. We also listened during the board dinner. You said you'd like a 1-page executive summary. The first page has that. and then the rest of the document goes through more details on the specific recommendations. I think I'd like to just, if I may, just read the introduction of what we have in this document, and it reads, the Hodgson-Harris Reservoir, otherwise known as HHR, located in the northeast area of Superior and owned and managed by Boulder County, has repeatedly been identified as a unique and important wildlife resource for Superior and is a Boulder County designated critical wildlife habitat. As such, it is vital that any new development in the vicinity of HHR be planned carefully to minimize disruption to the existing habitat and to enhance the value of HHR for both wildlife and residents of Superior. Like I said, I won't go through all of it, but just to give people an overview of what we think of this reservoir, it really comes down to, we've got 5 key recommendations when it comes to development. But the other thing I'll say is we didn't focus just on development. This was a holistic view of the reservoir in terms of water levels, which we've already actually seen Boulder County adjusting the water levels, and we've seen some wildlife already benefiting from drawing down the reservoir. Also vegetation around not just the north side of the reservoir, but also the south side. But when it comes to development, well, you'll see there's 5 key recommendations. There's a buffer zone, there's prevention of light, water, and sound pollution, habitat restoration, increasing the amenity or enhancing the amenities to be able to see the reservoir from the north side. And then there's another recommendation there on the prairie dogs, and they are rank ordered in terms of our priority. So anyway, we look forward to you all using this document should any development application come forward on that property. Like Trustee Hammerly said, please read it. If not, when a development comes forward, we will remind you that this document is out there. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.
Additional public comment? Yes, sir.
Hello, my name's Howard Fisher. I'm a Superior resident since 2009. Our house on Huron Peak backs to open space, which is southeast of Rocky Mountain Municipal Airport, herein referred to as RMMA. I have some questions to ask you. Have you been annoyed by pilots in training flying over your house? Or, gee, it's awfully late at night to hear planes flying over my house? Or why do I hear so many noisy passenger jets flying over Superior? What happens when one of these small planes crashes into one of our houses? Wouldn't it be better for them to fly over Rocky Flats rather than our neighborhood? I'd like to talk about airplanes and their disruption of our peace and quiet and safety. First, planes flying out of DIA are taking a direct route over Superior on their way to West Coast destinations. The jets are making a slow climb from DIA to go over Rocky Mountains to save fuel. You can clearly see and hear the jet turbines as they lumber over Superior and casually climb. If you're concerned about the increased traffic from DIA, there is a meeting. The Federal Aviation Administration will host a meeting at the Boulder Public Library Meadows branch on April 29th to share information and collect feedback on a proposed Denver Metroplex project at Denver International Airport. The library is located at 4800 Baseline Road, and the meeting runs from 5 to 7:30 p.m. The Denver Metroplex project is a federal action under the National Environmental Policy Act that would allow for more direct and efficient routing of aircraft in and out of Denver Airport and nearby airports. I'd like to see Superior make a strong showing at this meeting so we don't get steamrolled by Boulder. The second is RMMA. I have had several conversations with the FAA and RMMA officials in my 10 years about noise and flights over Superior. From my conversations, one conclusion is the tower has no control over pilots' flight path once they leave RMMA. I'm a little nervous. sorry about this. Okay. The training flights that annoy and endanger residents of Superior happen because, as of RMMA officials tell me, the training flights follow flight boxes over Superior. The pilots have to be able to see the runways. When I inquired about the flight boxes to the Denver FAA, they could not understand or define the flight boxes. I strongly believe that training flights should be directed over Rocky Flats Wildlife Preserve, where they can easily see the runway. I think Superior was chosen for the so-called flight box back in the day when Rocky Flats nuclear trigger plant in the 1960s was a no-fly zone area. There are over 1,000 residents in Rock Creek subdivision. RMMA enjoys the right to fly over our houses based on a navigation easement written in 1995 and based on a 1998 RMMA, or Jefferson County Airport Master Plan. The plan has since been updated in 2011. Here is the rub. Did RMMA violate the 1995 navigation easement that was when they upgraded the airport in 2012? The 1995 navigation easement was written by lawyers for Richmond Homes. Buried in each of the Rock Creek Ranch homeowners' title commitment is the navigation easement. The easement basically says, grantor, that is us, allows the grantee, the airport and airplanes, the right to fly over our houses. However, in the second paragraph, there's limitations. The easement granted under paragraph 1 that they can fly over our house shall remain in effect unless any of the following shall occur. Airport goes out of business. Well, we know that's not going to happen. The type, size of aircraft using the airport as permitted under 1998 master plan, if it's changed or become inconsistent to the 1998 master plan. If there's an increase in passenger usage over the master plan or the airport is used for freight delivery.
Mr. Fisher, we're at, up here. You're at 5 minutes, a little over 5 minutes. So yeah, if you don't mind wrapping up your comments,
Okay.
I appreciate it.
All right, so what I'm saying basically is that I believe they're in violations. I'm not a lawyer. So what I'm asking, the Superior Board of Trustees is once and for all to determine if the navigation easement is being violated and therefore null and void by hiring an attorney that specializes in navigation agreements to determine if RMMA has violated the 1995 navigation agreement. I believe it is the duty of the board to protect the safety and peace and enjoyment of our residences. 1,000 or more residents is not a small number, and we have the right to know where we stand in regard to the behavior of RMMA, who is no friend of ours.
Okay, thank you for your comments.
Thanks, Howard.
Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Rich Bavarnik, and my wife and I, we live at 1301 South Gibson Court. Our house is on the northeast corner, right across from the river bend, where perhaps one day a playground that I don't believe is necessary will be built. We moved here in 1994. I'm not sure that anybody on the board lived here in 1994. We have raised 2 kids. They're now 26 and 23. They went to Superior Elementary. One went to El Dorado Middle. One went to Monarch Middle. Both went to Monarch High School. Both went to CU. At no point in time, from when Scott was 10 months old to when Julia was born, did they need a park across the street from our house. We were able to take the path behind our house, cross Rock Creek Parkway, and go to what was then called the Purple Park, which we still call it the Purple Park, even though it's not purple. We were able to go across Rock Creek Parkway to go to the 2 playgrounds at the school, or the little playground at the pool. We were able to go down to what was built as Community Park. There were no problems with our kids, first with us, and then by themselves learning to cross Rock Creek Parkway. Never any incidents occurred. My wife and I were unable to be at the other meetings, but I wanted to come here today to express my concern over building an unnecessary play structure. I know a lot of my neighbors have already spoken to you about what that park is, what the park area is used for, the nature aspect of it. We've taken family photographs there. We used to fish in that pond. But what we don't need is another playground. Now, personally, when I read through all the information, the town has earmarked or set aside $700,000 for the potential building of this playground. I would submit that money could be better spent on the town. We don't need another playground, and we certainly don't need a playground across the street, essentially, from my house. We're spending $50,000 to try to figure out whether or not we need a playground. Personally, I wish the board had done the survey first, not waited till May 1 to see whether or not the 1,000 or so residents actually think we need a park. Personally, I would like the survey to go to property owners who pay the taxes that potentially represent the $700,000. It makes no sense to me as a homeowner here of 25 years to have a child. What child doesn't want a playground? To have somebody who rents, who has no vested interest in our community, but it should only be the people that are the homeowners because it adversely affects our property. It will increase traffic flow on Riverbend. People park sometimes on Riverbend. It could increase people walking across Riverbend with no crosswalk. I remember when I don't think we ever had initially streetlights at Riverbend in Indiana, but that I could be wrong about. So my request for the group here is that you take a long, hard look at, do we really need another playground? I would submit, my now adults would submit, they never needed a playground across the street, and I would respectfully request that the playground not spend $700,000 of our money. Let people learn how to cross the street. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment. Yes.
Well, good evening. My name is Kara Noisy, and I too am a resident on Gibson Court. Although I've got to tell you, I can really relate to some of what you were saying, because once upon a time I lived on Weldona Lane back in 1999 when I walked my 2-year-old at the time to Purple Park, and again, didn't need Riverbend Park for a fixture. I'm actually here today because I'm eager to hear what the committee is going to propose to you. I'm very excited to hear about what the engagement process is going to be, because I too would contend that this is a little backwards. I think the survey probably should have come out before anything was labeled Riverbend agenda item. I think that in itself tends to target or label and really prescribe a certain area for a park. And I don't know if that was the intent or not, but in my 25 years of program management, you have a requirement and then you figure out how you design it and then you apply funds. You don't come out with the solution first. And especially if this might not even be the optimal solution. And so I would say, you know, there is certainly the argument of preserving a natural preserve there at Riverbend Park. But I really want this committee to consider about deliberate planning. If there is indeed a requirement for a playground on that side of Rock Creek Parkway, I too contend that the money could be spent to looking at other areas on that side of Rock Creek Parkway. At Riverbend Park, there are actually 3 playgrounds within less of a quarter of a mile. Maybe if you went further south on Rock Creek Parkway on that side, maybe there are areas there. Maybe they're adjacent to the new bike park. I don't know, but I'm not convinced that there has been any planning beyond just Riverbend and what kind of fixtures can be put there to fix some kind of requirement that we presumably have in our neighborhood. So again, I'm excited to hear how this engagement process is going to work. I'm further interested in knowing how the decision-making process is going to be made and determining what, if anything, goes at Riverbend. That's all I have, unless you have any questions for me.
Thank you for your
Thank
comments.
you.
Appreciate it. Additional public comment?
Good evening, board. It's good to see you folks. I promise you, I'm not here to talk about airport stuff.
Brad.
I'm sorry?
Brad, I know who you are, but do you mind just stating your
Oh, I'm
name
sorry.
for the
Yes,
public
sir.
record? Just so
Sure.
everybody knows?
Brad Walker, Town of Superior.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. There's an agenda item on the agenda tonight about the town cemetery. I'm coming into this late, but I know the scout troop would probably be interested in volunteering to help. It's a great opportunity for service hours. I had to run over here really quick tonight. I have a scout meeting right now, but I wanted to make some comments and just say, as you guys work on the contracts and the parameters with the historical commission tonight, the scout troop would like to probably volunteer and look at it for some service hours. So when you do your deliberations, take that into consideration, if you don't mind. And have a good night.
Thank you. Appreciate the comments. Any additional public comment? Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to presentations, and we have none. So we're going to move on to the consent agenda. We've pulled 3C. So do we have a motion to approve consent agenda A, B, D, E, F?
So moved.
And G. Okay, motion by Mayor
Second.
Pro Tem Lasis and second by Trustee Hammerly. And we'll need a roll call vote on this because it involves some contracts.
Okay. Lasis,
Yes.
Hammerly,
Yes.
Folsom,
Yes.
Lish,
Yes.
Ryan,
Yes.
Shaw,
Yes.
Squizitsky.
Yes.
All right, thanks. Motion passes unanimously. All right, we've got item 3C on the consent agenda, approval of a manager change for Old Chicago. And Kevin, you pulled that.
Thanks. So Matt, I guess I wanted to talk about this a little bit. Do we have the applicant here? Do we know?
Would you like to just postpone this a few minutes?
Sure.
Further down the agenda? We're expecting them, perhaps.
Sounds good for me.
Sure, we can circle back to this agenda item later in the meeting.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, with that, we're on to item number 4, review of cemetery improvement plans. Welcome, Historical Commission members. And Patrick, looks like you've got an introduction.
Good evening, Patrick Hammer, town staff. I also have with me tonight Larry Dorsey as well as Brian Meyer, who's our recreation supervisor. Last year, Brian, working with the cemetery working group, started in this process of starting to go through the various priorities on what we could do now to upgrade the cemetery. And that tonight's just going to be a status update of that presentation. I would like to quickly call to your attention. I had a misunderstanding between myself and the committee. We did make a switch here. I had understood that the committee, the working group, had prioritized the perimeter fence in 2019 work as opposed to the interior entry area. So just know that we have made that switch this evening. That was something that was my fault in the communication back and forth. So when we get to this slide, we made this change today, you'll see the interior entry area is prioritized over the perimeter fence. And with that, I'll have Brian kind of come up and give a brief overview. Larry's here. Karen and Wally Waligorski are also here to answer any questions.
All right, thanks, Patrick. Brian Meyer, town staff. I'm just going to give a brief update on kind of where we're at with the cemetery restoration project and kind of how we got here over the last year. About a year ago, per the direction from the previous town board, we worked on forming a cemetery working group, and that group was tasked with spearheading efforts at the historic cemetery site. That group is actually currently made up of 6 individuals, 4 of which are historical commission members. 4 are here tonight, or 3 of them are here tonight. And the main job of the cemetery working group, like I said, is to look at identifying what site improvements can be done up at the site, not necessarily just this year, but also future years as well. This year, we're trying to focus on given the eventual residential and park site development just outside of the perimeter fence, we're trying to focus on improvements to make on the interior. So that's kind of the short term and what we've been discussing over this past year. $30,000 is budgeted for this year, and we'll get into a little bit. I'll provide a little bit of detail on what exactly the group has identified to have done for this year. So a little site timeline. So last year, last summer, staff met with the working group up on site, and we kind of tasked them with doing a thorough site walkthrough with no constraints, no financial constraints, no idea is too big. Just wanted them to walk the site and brainstorm and identify different priorities that they'd like to see eventually up there. One thing we did preface it with is, to try to have the group visualize, 5-10 years down the road, it's going to look much different up there. There's going to be obviously park, residential. There's going to be a lot more foot traffic, bike traffic, just more people in general. So, for example, do you want, the gate to still stay locked, or do you want to have more of like an open access where people can come and go and learn about the cemetery and walk through the site? So, but other than that, we just kind of let it, use your imagination. What would you like to see up here at the site? So that was a pretty thorough walkthrough. I know Trustee Dazelle was actually there as well, kind of helping with that effort. And then following that, me and Karen Snortland began working with consultants from Cemetery Planning Resource Alliance out of Littleton, and they specialize in cemetery restoration. We took many of those ideas that the group formulated to them and worked with them over the course of a few months to develop some conceptual planning designs and cost opinions for those various site improvements. And I'll show you in another slide here what exactly one drawing that they came back to us with. We did, and then like I said, cost opinions as well, so we can kind of identify what work we can have done this year. Following that then, myself and Karen met with the cemetery working group last month and took those cost opinions and the drawing and tried to kind of narrow down what they'd like to see done this year with the $30,000 budget. And again, concentrating on the interior of the fence, interior within the perimeter fence there. And then additionally, kind of moving forward, I think the group would be interested in potentially making a budget recommendation for future work done at the site. So, okay. So yeah, there's a little aerial, just kind of satellite view there. Okay. So this is kind of the main drawing that we took to the group last month. And a lot of people, the first question they ask is, what are those, what do the colored symbols mean? And I always have to kind of refer to this here a little bit, but the yellow represents actual documented gravestones or headstones at the cemetery site. And the Historical Commission in the early 2000s, when there was some work being done up there, they worked to document the existing headstones and gravestones that are up there. So that's the yellow. The orange are documented grave sites from an underground ground penetrating radar survey that was also conducted around that time. And they identified additional burials or grave sites as well. In the green are possible grave sites. So all in all, I think there's roughly 90 possible grave sites up there. Now, again, before we do any work up there, we're actually going to, part of the thorough site analysis, we're going to have another ground penetrating radar survey conducted just to ensure that any work that we do have up there, such as, crusher fine path or whatnot, is not going over, potential burial. So that's going to be part of the site analysis. Kind of looking a little bit deeper on here, you can see some of the landscaping on the west and south. That would be kind of drought tolerant, low profile, native landscaping, nothing that would obscure any of those, amazing views to the west or the south. Additionally, like I said, you have the 4 kind of crusher fine loops. Those loops are more kind of meandering. They're not necessarily going to a specific significant headstone or gravestone, but they kind of meander throughout the site so people can walk through. And then additionally, an interior gathering area. So if people, whether it be a pedestrian traffic or tours or just a large group, families coming, they can go to that gathering area before they walk into the site and learn about the cemetery, the historic aspect of the cemetery, maybe significant burials that are up at the site and whatnot. So we would obviously work with the working group to kind of fine tune some of that information. But there would also be stone block benches and whatnot. So that's another potential amenity that the group could choose. So yeah, what is not listed on here, some of the headstones actually need repaired. There was a grant that the commission got in the early 2000s from the State Historical Fund that did some headstone repair. There are still quite a few headstones that are in need of repair, so that's also a potential option to get done this year or next year as well. And then lastly, that perimeter fencing, there are some areas that can be shored up there a little bit. So that's not necessarily listed on this particular drawing. So we took this to the cemetery working group last month, and to try to narrow it down a little bit, Patrick just brought this up, but what they've identified for this budget year in 2019, now again, the site prep is a given, so regardless, before we do any work up there, we're going to do the site preps, the surveying, staking, and again, that ground penetrating radar survey is going to be part of that. We'll work with CPRA to have that conducted, but so that's 10 right off the top, and then that interior entry area, the group identified that as an item that they would like to have done this year. Whether that gate stays, I think right now it's probably going to remain locked. But again, I think eventually they're going to decide it's inevitable that it'll be kind of an open access area into the cemetery. And then Trail Phase 1 is going to be, they'd like to see, backing up here. So Trail Phase 1 would be just the perimeter loop of the path here, so not connecting anything in between. It would just be the kind of the exterior there. So and there's your 30,000. So so that's, we'd like to have this, work with the contractor to get this done. I think implemented before the end of the summer, ideally. I know the Historic Commission would like to possibly bring back their walking tour up at the site that they did a couple years ago. Kind of during Halloween time or whatnot. But we would look to work with the contractor who could potentially implement some of these 2020 items as well. So the fence, connecting all of the trails, and then there is potential to get a grant for the headstone repair again, but also have that as a potential 2020 item as well. So that is kind of the update where we're at. And again, we'll keep working with the cemetery working group moving forward. But that's where we're at for this year. And again, Karen and myself are going to work towards, putting this out to bid and getting the work done. And so if you have any, I know we're excited to get this done. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask me. I know Larry and Karen and Wally are here as well, so Patrick too. So.
All right, thank you very much for the presentation. We'll take board questions. Kevin?
I guess I have a couple questions. I hate to dig up the question from I asked last year. I have 3 dad jokes. Nobody laughed at the first one, but thank you. Right, good. So I feel you talked about the openness and how it would be inevitable. I talked about this last year, and I'd love to just hear as part of the working group whether or not that's been a discussion. I think Graveyard's beautiful. I think this one in particular is beautiful, and I know if it was locked, it would be open and we would provide tours, but this now is going to be a 5-minute walk from hundreds of residents. I don't think those hundreds of residents are going to be seeking tours. I would like it to be open, and wondering if the working committee has addressed that at all.
Yeah, we did talk about that, and really from the individuals who were there during that discussion, I think everyone was very open to that and thinks that, you know, given some of the site improvements that are going to be done up there, that they would like to see that, and I think they probably agree with what you just said as well. So
okay, because it's a really nice area, and if it is, if we're going to put this much money in it, I think it should be an amenity that the community should be able to enjoy. And, you know, this is, we received comments around sort of open space, and are we going to pollute open space with playgrounds? This is a very tranquil place that we'll obviously never have a playground there, but there's no reason why somebody couldn't go there and walk and meditate or think about things. And so I feel strongly about that as a...
One aspect to piggyback onto that, which I think is a good comment, is maybe surveillance. We you know, might something to think about on a staff perspective on how, just to kind of try to prevent any vandalism that might occur up there too.
I feel strongly that people should be able to meditate in peace without Big Brother wondering what they're doing. So I wouldn't be one for surveillance.
Okay.
I can't imagine we're going to have any type of vandalism in a graveyard, and if it does, I think those people might be accountable elsewhere, not necessarily to our community. So thanks.
Neil.
Just a question. If you go back a slide, I just want to make sure I understand the orientation or how people will access, because the entrance is on the east. And if, let's say, they parked somewhere at the sports stable, would they then walk along the bikeway to get to the entrance?
Yeah, you know, and I'm actually going to have Patrick probably answer that. Yeah.
Patrick Hammer, town staff. So planned on the west side, and I guess this would be, well, actually these 3 sides. So east, south, and west side will be the future Park 3 or Central Park. Okay. So with the future development, you'll see some road access that comes through for future residential. That'll lead to a parking infrastructure that'll sit generally in this area. You'll also see the formalization of this road grade here turn into a trail section, and then you'll see some lower level. This is the detention pond. This area in here will encompass the park. There'll be some dedicated parking as well. Okay. Kind of a tiered pattern where people can access. The entryway is conceptually planned still for right here.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks to everyone who was on the working group. I appreciate all the time and effort. I was looking through the concept plan and noticed the cemetery programming goals. Can you clarify, is that the working group's goals, or specifically that were developed, or where did those goals come from?
Yeah, those goals actually came from in Karen and I's discussions with the Cemetery Planning Resource Alliance, and kind of just some overarching, kind of larger things to think about as we're doing these site improvements and discussing them with the working group. So it was more from the consultants and it's just some things to think about before we do some of the improvements. Yeah.
Okay. One of the things, and I'll probably fall on the opposite side of where Kevin was at on this, but I see up at the top the number one goal is preservation. My concern with making it as interactive as it is with the walking paths going through is it could get overused. I want to make sure whatever we do still ensures that we have proper respect. I'm a little concerned with having the US 36 bikeway right there. I'm concerned with the hundreds of residents that are moving in. It's a nice amenity, but it's a nice amenity for its historical value and the respect that it brings. I am hoping that as we move forward, we take that into account. My preference would be to more or less keep it as is, where we have tours and it's locked, to ensure that we're trying to control the proper use rather than allowing for improper use. I've seen articles and papers about Boulder struggling with their cemeteries up near the hill getting vandalized. I see problems occurring with us if we make it too open, and that number one goal of preservation is my number one concern. To that end, I also had a few residents talk to me about the price tags that are coming with this. If we do end up falling on the side that I am favoring, where we are keeping it more closed rather than open, I suppose my question is, do we need as many trails? Do we need to make it as not, I think it would be nice no matter what we do, but adding as many amenities within it as there are. Looking at a 2-year budget of $68,000 to $77,000, if it's not going to be a full open amenity, gives me a little bit of concern with the price tag. With that, I'd also be curious to hear what our out-year costs are that we're projecting to maintain, whether we do surveillance or not, but what the remaining price tags are year over year.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ken. Others? Sandy?
For me, this cemetery is it's a mystery up on the hill that is inaccessible. And I agree strongly with Trustee Ryan that if we're going to invest in this, I want it to be accessible as a place that I can go and learn the history of our town and meditate or just enjoy the beauty of the area. I come from a very historical part of Virginia. The cemetery is full of Civil War soldiers, and you know, the cemetery is absolutely 100% open all the time. Anyone can go in there and learn the history of the residents of the community, their gravestones dating back to the 1600s. And so I really commend the committee for the good work they're doing, but I really ask that we strongly consider that if we do this, that we make it open. It's okay if there's a fence, but I don't want that fence locked.
Okay, others?
Hello, Larry Dorsey, Chair of the Historical Commission, and these are certainly very good questions. We really appreciate all the support we've been getting from the board and the town staff on our on various cemetery projects. First of all, I think that I don't think we've really decided on this open and closed issue at this point. I think what we'd like to do would be to compare what goes on at, let's say, Louisville and Lafayette, Erie cemeteries. We have historic cemeteries there too, because I could visualize having it open during the daytime and having town staff close it in the evening or something like that if there's somebody available to do that. And because as was said earlier about vandalism in Boulder, I remember Longmont especially has had a lot of vandalism in their cemetery, the tipping of headstones, what have you. And so we'd like to have it open, certainly, but there may be, just out of pure necessity, ways to keep it not as accessible in the evening when things like that tend to happen, early morning hours and what have you. So, and the parking issue that Trustee Shaw brought up, we've had in the back of our mind, well, the front of our minds really, all throughout this process, is that street connecting what's now going to be the downtown Superior to the developments that parallel US 36, as was pointed out by town staff, have the parking spaces there and pure access all the way through that area, and parking spaces and handicap accessible parking places and that sort of thing. So we're real excited about the prospects here, and we hope that the result of the expenditure of the funds is a first-class amenity for Superior. Patrick reminded me too that maybe one of us should point out that this morning I got a phone call from Patrick about the reporter from Channel 7 News was going to be on site. And I said, when? Well, anytime, and that's just what happened. It was before noon. He showed up and interviewed Patrick and myself, and then he and I went over to the Historical Museum and then up to the cemetery, and it aired this afternoon at 5 o'clock, and I thought it was pretty well done. Patrick did a really good job, and the reporter is going to send links to so he can figure out how to access the not only the segment but additional footage that he shot too. And I'd be happy to answer any other questions as long as I'm up here if you have any.
Oh, great. Larry, appreciate all the work that you and the committee have done to make this happen. I know it's been a long time in the making, and I remember touring it with Matt several years ago, and it was it's a really neat piece of Superior's history. I'll weigh in on my thoughts on the open, close, and so on. I think open would be my preference as well. I'm not as concerned about the vandalism. I think I think the odds of that are lower, and I'd rather have it be open for people to come and go. And I think that's something that if we find that being a huge problem down the road, we can certainly address that. But I'd rather spend the money on the entry area and the interpretive signage in a loop, maybe a single loop around, and just to see how that goes, and then later perhaps do, if we find a fence is needed, if we find more trails are needed, just depending on usage, then maybe address more. But to me, a single loop, open atmosphere seems like the right approach.
When I was up there this afternoon, this morning, I was around lunchtime, I guess, with the reporter. The grass is just coming up, and it's really spectacular green up there right at the moment too. So if you can stand a little mud on your boots, it's a good trip to take up there right now.
So I just say it's out there. I found the link, and so
okay.
Can I take a minute and just read it, because I'm going to have a couple questions. So let me read let's just take a minute. Colorado is full of small towns that are growing and becoming more modern. The Boulder County town of Superior is in the midst of a development boom and trying to figure out how to balance the needs of a growing city with the needs to preserve the past. According to Patrick Hammer, the town's Park and Recreations Director, Superior has been around since the late 1800s and has a lot of history. It's really just a small town nestled between a bunch of cities, Hammer said. It's kind of modern, but has a small town feel. Superior's Historical Commission Chair Larry Dorsey says protecting the area's history is essential. Now is an opportunity to pass on the knowledge we have of the past in this town to our more recent residents, Dorsey said. He runs Superior's Historical Museum and said the town is looking to preserve a historic cemetery, one of its oldest sites. The cemetery rests on a hill and is the home of 90 former members of the town. However, it is surrounded by encroaching development. There are 50 graves that are well marked, Dorsey said, and others that are not. There are 2 Civil War veterans' graves, and I think about 22 of the 50 we know are of all children. Hammer said the town is proposing a plan to restore the cemetery, keeping its history. Initially, we're looking to spend $30,000 this year, Hammer said. We're hoping to secure more funding from our elected officials next year. According to Hammer, the total cost of restoration is around $200,000. The plan will be presented in a meeting on April 23rd at 1 p.m. at the sports stable. So I guess my initial question is, do we have a meeting tomorrow at the sports stable? Or is that just, fake news?
No,
I'm kidding, Channel 7. Great job, Channel 7, by the way.
It was around, Parks and Rec does have a meeting tomorrow at the sports stable. It's not related to this. So no, this was the meeting. There is no subsequent meeting other than if the committee comes.
Well, if you get some people, welcome them. And
yeah, absolutely. We'll take them up there.
And so the total cost of restoration around $200,000?
Including the exterior. Interior items was the focus for the first 2 years, knowing that at some point in the future, when residential and park space is built, including parking lot.
But the parking lot would presumably be, is that our dime or is that TIF?
No,
When the Central Park comes forward as an FDP, is something we'll have discussion with the master developer at that time.
Okay.
Yep.
So right now, just contemplated, we had thrown that number in there as it sits on our property, but to Matt's point, I think it's something we should definitely discuss.
Okay, thanks, really well done. And the picture is really nice, so, to your point around the grass there, so, looks great.
Okay, is there anything further? Okay, appreciate the update. All right, do we have any update on 3C? Do we have our applicant for 3C, Old Chicago?
See someone from Old Chicago here tonight.
Okay, all right, well.
If we get to after the next time, we'll just table it.
Yeah.
Okay. That'd be my.
All right, we're on to item number 5, public engagement process review, Riverbend Park. All right,
Thanks,
welcome, Patrick.
Patrick Hammer, town staff. Tonight, I get the pleasure of introducing you to some of my staff who you don't always see. So you got to meet Brian Meyer on the cemetery stuff. And I've asked Allison James, who's now working as the staff liaison with ProStack, who's been involved in the Riverbend Park public engagement planning to come and just give you guys kind of an update, status update. We have not started the public engagement process yet, as you'll see. But in keeping with kind of our tradition in engaging the community and kind of unfiltered communication in terms of facility development, park development, trail development, Allison, with a consultant, landscape architect who the town's worked with in the past from Design Concepts, as well as ProStack, has come up with a plan that we'd like to collect feedback from you guys this evening. And with that, I'll have Allison James come up, and I don't think we have anybody here from ProStack, but ProStack's been involved in this process for several months as well.
Thanks, Patrick. I'm Allison James. I work for the Parks, Rec, and Open Space Department, and I'm also the liaison, like Patrick mentioned, to ProStack. And the item before you this evening is about the public engagement for a potential playground feature or features at Riverbend Park. And we're just beginning this engagement. ProStack has been doing a great job organizing and planning this process, and their plan is to gather open-ended and unfiltered, unbiased opinions from all the residents. Some of ProStack's goals for the engagement are to get a high participation rate from residents and to inform ProStack's recommendation to the board. And Patrick feels like this is an important part of our track record in Parks, Rec, and Open Space, and closely involving our residents for our services and civic engagement. Some of the materials that we'll be talking about to residents is the board's direction to conduct public engagement and budget information, historical overviews, and kind of outreach details on all of our meetings, you know, times, locations, and different resources we'll be using to engage the public. And specifically that our budget for this year is $50,000 for concept design and public engagement. And we have a placeholder next year in 2020 of $700,000. The different opportunities that ProStack has planned is a kickoff on Arbor Day, which is this Saturday at Autry Park from 10 to 12. And they'll be having members there at the event and handing out flyers with information on the engagement opportunities. They're planning on either creating a door hanger or postcard to send to the adjacent properties around the park. There'll be 2 community workshops and a potential online survey. Another opportunity will be they'll be placing flyers at the park along the trails so that users can find the information while they're walking their dogs or out with their families. There'll be marketing on all the different avenues that the town utilizes as well. There'll be 2 different engagement workshops, and like we said before, ProStack is hoping to gather as much feedback as possible for and against the project. And one big part of these workshops is education around what the site constraints are. You know, a lot of people have mentioned ponds and streets and things like that. So water tables will be examined, and the consultant is working on contours and what's feasible in which areas. At workshop number 1, which will be during ProStack's regular meeting on May 15th here at Town Hall from 7 to 8:30. And this will be more of a formal meeting where groups can discuss and work together and put their ideas on cards. After they put their ideas on the cards, the participants will gather these ideas into categories, and then they'll be given the opportunity to give any additional comments that they don't feel have been addressed by the card activity. The second engagement workshop will be on site at Riverbend Park, and areas of possible opportunity will be defined and marked in the actual park itself. It'll be less formal, and we're going to give people the opportunity to have a sort of family drop-in type engagement. And this will be on June 1st from 10:30 to 12. It'll show the physical areas of the site that are potential opportunities for any features or amenities that are defined by some of the site constraints that we may be facing. There'll be maps for participants to mark up and give feedback, and there'll be also another opportunity for open-ended comments. So here's the next part to this will be ProStack will compile the feedback from this information and create charrettes and concepts to be given to the public again on July 4th at the Parade and Pancake Festival. And let me back up for a second. There'll also be a survey conducted before these charrettes are created. So the 2 workshops and the online survey is what they're planning to create these charrettes from for 4th of July, if it's warranted, if the findings show that we're going to go ahead and make charrettes. The public will be engaged again at the 4th of July event, and then that feedback will be revised again with ProStack, who will then develop a a management strategy and do cost estimates for the charrettes and present it to the board in time for the 2020 budget meeting. So again, just to go over the timeline, our kickoff is this Saturday at Arbor Day, where ProStack will be engaging the public and giving them information about the meetings. Marketing materials and surveys are to start going out to the public as of May 1st. And door hangers and possible postcards to the adjacent homes to the park will be sent out. Workshop number 1 will be on May 15th here at Town Hall. And number 2, June 1st, at Riverbend Park. ProStack will look at that feedback and create charrettes to engage the public again at the July 4th event. And cost estimates will be created to bring before the board in September. And thank you for your time. ProStack's worked really hard on this process. And do you have any questions or comments?
I have a question around the charrettes. So I've typically heard that term as more the actual design sessions themselves. So can you explain what exactly will be put together to share with the public?
Sure, there'll be probably picture boards or visuals of where amenities could go in the park and what could possibly go there. Thank you.
So the photos on the workshop activity, which is slide, I don't know, the 4 pictures, that one, this looks nothing like any other playground in town. There's no plastic, which I love, right? That's intentional.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
But that is an intentional design.
Possible low-lying features were spoken about at our meetings.
Great. And I think that I'm sure you heard some community feedback around, do we need another playground? This may be a playground like no other in town. It will be it still will have the serenity of where the space is, presumably, but it appears to me like ProStack is looking for something that low level, these things look like something that you may find more in a campground, serene place, thanks Corey, not in a, again, just the absence of plastic. I love that concept and it felt like that was intentional and I wanted you or somebody to maybe speak to that.
Well, I was just going to step up and one of the things we've been talking about a lot in the ProStack. Corey Oxner, ProStack chair. Sorry, I'm a little late, but one of the things we've been talking about in a lot of the ProStack meetings is that it's really a information gathering and finding of what the community wants and what we want to put there. So a lot of these are concepts, but that doesn't mean that's what will be there. And really in these charrette processes with design concepts, there's a lot of discussion about really a site analysis and understanding what the site can do and can't do, because there's a lot of restrictions on the site. And therefore, that would be one of the things that we want to bring forward in the charrette process to the community to say, here's some of the areas that could be developed or put some natural features and some of the areas that can't. And then from there, by July, really come to an understanding of what do we really want to achieve and what does the neighborhood want to achieve? Because we heard a lot in the last couple meetings with a lot of public comment that they want to maintain that serenity feeling and space there, but there's also a lot of people use that as a fishing pond, and there's potential for even doing like a little fishing dock or something like that. It doesn't always have to be the plastic top lot added on here, but something more, peaceful, still active, but yet provides a different sense for a park that we don't have in town. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and really between now and July, trying to sort all that out. And that's really where opening up to the public and finding out that information is what we're trying to achieve.
Okay, thanks. Sorry. We are going to offer an opportunity for public comment, but we'll take a few more board questions and then we'll open that up to public comment. So thank you. Okay, others? Lori, do you have something else?
Yep. Just wanted to know with regard to the survey that will be going out to residents. So I know you had mentioned the door hangers. Is that essentially the door hangers will kind of announce the survey and then it will go out online is what I heard?
We're also looking at potentially sending out postcards with the information, and we haven't decided if it's going to be door hangers or postcards yet.
a favor. I like the idea of anonymity in a survey at the same time. Did I get that word right?
You did.
Thank you. Anonymity? Anonymity.
I know what word you mean.
Right.
Anonymous.
Right.
To be
At the same time, there's likely to be a question around respondents. And so the ability to slice the data a little differently, we've struggled with this on some of our survey responses previously. And so I don't want to direct anything here, but just understand that if we make a choice that you choose, that you would like to slice the data, please make sure that the surveys are sent in a way that the data can be sliced by 500 feet, 700 feet, south of Colton, north of Colton, however, may be helpful, because I think we've struggled with that.
I would just also add to that, I know in the past we've talked about, depending whether we mail it out, whether we put it physically on doors, that also affects whether you get the property owner versus the person living there at the time. I would be very interested in hearing from both parties. I think they both have valuable input, but to Trustee Ryan's point, I think we need to be able to understand who we're hearing from.
Right, and in our last meeting, we talked about different opportunities for how the survey is written so that we understand that there's an address and a location of the person responding, so that way we can try and filter, just to understand proximity to the park, because some people that are on the other side of town may not be as concerned as those right in the vicinity of the park itself and may not utilize the park as much. So we want to make sure we get a cross section of understanding. So that's part of the questions, just to understand, do you really want anything done there? Do you not want anything done there? Are you close? Are you far away? Do you not care? You know, those type of things, we just want to understand the cross section of people and be able to break it down a little bit more.
No, please go ahead.
And some general demographic information.
One other question you may want to include is something along the lines of, if you were to use this park, would you drive or walk/bike to get there?
I appreciate the level of detail that you're going into to engage the public. I think people, need to weigh in on this, and they also need to have details of what they're weighing in on, because a park means a lot of different things. I mean, it means plastic tot equipment to some, it means this interactive thing to others, and then park can mean doing nothing and leaving it as the beautiful park that it is. So it means a lot of different things, but I think in order to get valid responses, we do need to go through this process. But my question, I do have a little concern about the amount of money earmarked for the total engagement. And the question is, if ProStack sees this trending perhaps in a strong do nothing direction, is there a point where you would say, okay, we're clearly trending in this direction, maybe we don't need to do steps 8, 9, 10, that sort of thing?
Well, I think a lot of that's going to come out of the first couple of charrettes. I mean, we've already had a pretty strong showing of community show up to even just how we are going to present it to the community. So in those first couple of charrettes of the next month, May 15th here, I'm sure we'll have more engagement and understanding from those individuals. Plus, we intend to have understanding of what we can and can't do on the site. And then from that, the neighborhood gathering in June 1st, just that's trying to get to the site versus trying to bring the site to us to get input. By the time we have those two meetings, I think we'll have a much better understanding and already have the survey out. We have the survey out by then? I can't remember. So anyway, but those key things, I think that'll give us a lot of feedback. And at that point, whether we move forward with a design and have something more permanent as a design for July, or whether or not we kind of start understanding what the community wants. So I think we can kind of make a determination, hopefully by July.
All right. I've been around here long enough to have gone through these things where we do get kind of design heavy, and then we decide not to do something, and then we have spent money on designs that we don't end up implementing. And I just would like us to try not to go there if that's not where we're going to go.
And I think that's the other term of the charrette, because the charrette is really just an understanding of the existing site constraints and what we can do there, not a final design. And that final design is where you're spending a lot more in time and effort.
I do have a question. There is general consensus from ProStack that there should be additional park amenities at this location, correct?
I don't know if we've had a specific yes or no from the committee. I missed the last meeting, so I'm not 100% sure if there was a discussion on that. I don't know, Alice.
And I think mainly the group has been working towards the process that was directed for them to engage in, and I don't think they've really weighed in on their thoughts about it.
Yeah, we haven't had a group say yes or no. Because we're trying to gather the info, and that's what we're.
I do hate that. So we did this last year to you guys, right? Where we had an interesting idea around pickleball, and then we got too far, we tabled it, and so now I'm growing concerned that if you feel like this is board direction to layer in amenities that we've directed that is not ProStack's direction, that's, to me, that's undermining the value of the committee structure.
Well, I think that just from the last couple meetings, there's a pretty good showing from the community on potentially not wanting to add too much to this. And therefore, some of the site constraints that we're finding are questioning how much we could even add there, even if we do. So we have not, as a committee, had a statement of saying we're for it or against it. We've been going through the process to make sure we get the input, which provides the community input to us, versus just the committee giving our sense of the 5-6 individuals that may not live right around that park.
Right, but not, I don't want to put words in Clint's mouth, but what I heard, Clint, was, we could do a yes, no for 5,000 and then the charrette for 50, right? I mean, it would be unfortunate if we spent 50 to hear there's not support from the community.
Right.
So that would be,
I agree. I mean, obviously we don't want to spend a ton of money on a design and then find out that there's not demand for, implementing that design. But, I think I'm interested in hearing from the community as well in terms of, the residents who are opposed to this. It's unusual to me that, anytime that we're talking about actually, putting in a park that there is opposition. At least it's the first time that I've seen it. But at the same time, when we talked about during the budgeting process last August, September, and when we were talking about Coal Creek and the closure of Weldona, there definitely was outreach from the community living in that neighborhood about the need and the desire for a park in that general area. So I'm not saying there's a right or a wrong answer to any of this. I'm sure there's people who like it, and there's probably people who don't want it. And then ultimately it's going to be a question for the board. So, while I appreciate the idea of asking ProStack to weigh in on, whether or not they think that this is something that should be done, kind of puts them in an awkward position, because typically when we're giving direction to our advisory committees to implement a policy goal, we tend not to ask them to second guess our decision-making process. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily wrong for us to do that in this instance, but typically our advisory committees will just carry out directions from us and give us advice on design. They won't necessarily question whether or not they should be engaging in that process to begin with. You see what my point is?
So first, thanks for the dialogue, because this is the point I was making a couple weeks ago.
Right.
This is exactly what I want. So for those that if you're used to us going down, I'm trying to have a dialogue. But I don't know if I agree with that, Mark, right? Because if we were hearing about trail connections, and ProStack and OSAC would say, okay, here's or acquisition of new property, and we did something that was not consistent with the priorities that one of our committees would say, or for example, if the historical commission said, no, we feel strongly about having the gates locked for reasons 1, 2, 3, and 4, which was kind of the message we got a year and a half ago, that's why we create the committees. And I feel strongly we can't be undermining the committees. So I do feel like we may have, again, when we do this, unintentionally undermine the value of the committee structure by putting something very specific on the agenda, which is go layer in some super cool park-like amenities, play-like amenities into an existing park environment, without asking ProStack that first question is it a good idea to layer in play-like amenities in a cool park-like environment? Because the answer from ProStack may have been no. Well,
yeah. I mean,
that's why we put them on the committee.
And I appreciate that, and I think that that's a really good point. And I'm not necessarily suggesting one way is necessarily the right way of doing it. I guess my point was, this is the way we have historically done it. We've typically given direction to the advisory committees as to, this is something we want to do. We want to build a park over here. We want to, implement these trails, and then you guys figure out and give us your best recommendations as to how to go about actually facilitating that whole process. We haven't given direction to our committees to say, do X, Y, Z, and while you're doing it, let us know if you think it's a mistake to do X, Y, Z. And frankly, I agree. If we're going to be making a mistake potentially, I want somebody to raise.
I thought it was a really cool idea to put play-like amenities into this park environment. I thought it was a great idea. But now that I'm starting to get feedback, and that's why, Corey, to be honest, I thought your question was going to be, yeah, of course. And then I remembered we put this on your work plan without sort of asking, which we did that, now 2 years to you in a row. So, maybe we could just, I don't know if it's a pivot, but just be very conscious of the fact that if the answer is going to be no, let's just get ready to.
So Kevin, I was going to add, we got to be careful here because the public engagement process hasn't even started.
We're presupposing.
We've got some comments, but there's probably people who are in support of this that haven't even been engaged yet.
Oh, I hear you.
So, I think everything that ProStack has done to date has been building a process to get the engagement and start bringing it in by layering it onto the Pancake Parade, Autry Park opening, all those things to try to bring as many people as possible to this discussion. And the 50,000, you guys have to correct me, part of that's part of the geotech analysis on what can you even do, because Riverbend is a detention pond. The water table extends out quite a ways. The playground consultant is a little concerned about the proximity of the street. So a good chunk of this $50,000 is really just estimating what is even reasonable in this area. It's not about, we're not spending $50,000 on postcards. It's more about getting as many people engaged in the process so that ProStack can, at the end of the process, come and say, hey, we think there's a good idea here, and this is what the constraints that you can work under, or this is a terrible idea, and we should put a park over there. That's the way that I've been viewing it, from sitting in on ProStack meetings. And, I don't think they want to presuppose and say park has to go here. I think they're actually waiting to see what the information from the residents actually says, in addition to the geotech constraints allows us to do.
And just to clarify one piece, and Corey, I appreciate that you guys haven't specifically brought up the yay and nay, fully support this park one way or the other. But there's a ProStack amenities list that was just recently updated, and this park was in the top 3. So ProStack has still spoken that this is a high priority. Whether that was influenced by the board or not can be debated, but it's still at the top of the list.
But I would like to comment. I think this showed up on the ProStack amenities list because of a direction from the board. It's having been a member of ProStack for years and being the liaison to the committee until this year, this did not bubble up from ProStack. This came down from the board, and I appreciate the comments of Trustee Ryan, because it was sort of the same situation that happened last year with the pickleball courts. And so I think we're putting ProStack in a little bit of an unfair position because they had an amenity list prior to this and to pickleball being added, and neither of those. Now, I'm not saying that our opinions don't count, but they've been our experts for years in listening to the community, and so I want to a little bit stand up for them, because it's an amenity because the board asked it to be an amenity. And I'm seeing support from the chair of ProStack because they know that this is a priority of the board. It became a priority for ProStack, and that is what their job is right. To fulfill the things that we ask them to do. So I don't want to put them in an unfair position.
It's an interesting kind of discussion about how we actually got to where we are right now, because the way this came to us originally is it was raised to the board that this is the one area in Superior, one area of Rock Creek specifically, that is kind of landlocked, that does not have a park within walking distance, that doesn't require crossing a major arterial like Rock Creek Parkway. So that came as really, it's one of those things that, sure, if you look at a map, and you're studying it, you say, oh, that's pretty apparent. But it certainly came, I think, as news to the rest of the board. And as a result of that, we said, well, maybe we need to solve that problem, right? And we started hearing from people with the Lanterns Lane development, and they're talking about maybe putting a park over there, or maybe it would be in Riverbend Park. People talking about it during the Weldona Lane closure. And as a result, we talked about it during the budgeting process that, well, let's, budget some money towards exploring this. So, I think under the circumstances, we're being responsive to the community. But, to Kevin's point and to Sandy's point, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily a good idea or a right idea. And when we give the direction to our advisory committees like ProStack in this instance, I think it's appropriate for ProStack to say, yes, this is a good idea, or no, this isn't a good idea, or maybe we're split on it, and ultimately it's going to be a question for the board to decide. And in that process, engage with the public, both at the committee level and then obviously at the board level. So, I think that this process, to me, we are at just the beginning stages of the public engagement process. I'm certainly interested in hearing from all the residents who are here tonight as to, why they are opposed to it. But I'm also interested in hearing from the residents who are in support of it as well.
I was going to say, I'd just like to add one other point, though. ProStack didn't have $50,000. They didn't have $750,000 and to spend on an amenity. And it would have been interesting to have the conversation with them. If we gave you $750,000, how would you spend the money? It's possible they might have said pickleball. They might have said trails. We don't know. But basically, we didn't give them that option. And so I think that's the other important consideration here is they don't really have $1 million that they control anywhere, and so they are doing what we asked them to do. But if they were given $750,000, they might have different priorities because they have an amenities list that they've been working on. I know it's been in place for 10 years, and there might be higher priorities. So, I'm sorry, I advocate for them a little bit just because of my experience, and I've lived and breathed what they do.
So can I jump on that one?
Yes.
So basically I was going to say, we haven't asked the committee whether we're for or against it. We're just working through the process and trying to get the input. We do provide we have an amenities list that we maintain every year, and I don't believe last year or the year before that Riverbend was on there. A lot of times the amenities list is items within the community that we are lacking or needs improvement or something that we want to add to the community, and Riverbend is an established park, and therefore it hasn't always been on there. But we do have also parks that may need maintenance or updates, those type of things, and therefore Riverbend would be on that list of things. So we have lots of different avenues of what would be high on our list, but we look to the board to direct us on where we think the next direction should be for us to explore. So with that, I'll just say that, we're going through the process, want to get the input. If we don't think it's the right thing, hopefully even within this first month or so, 2 months of just getting feedback from the community, will provide us direction whether or not that earmarked money would stay or if that would go to something else.
Okay. So I'll add one other thought that I've had as we've gone through this discussion. This sort of reminds me of the disc golf at Purple Park a couple of years ago, for those that remember that. We had disc golf tournament. It was very cool. And some people said, hey, this was so cool. Why don't we put up some baskets there and make it of it? And then, the neighbors were like, what? Hold the phone. They didn't know. Purple Park is Purple Park. And that's what we want it to stay. So I support the process. I want to hear from everybody, but it does feel a little bit to me like we're changing the program for really long-time residents, and I think we just need to really keep that in check.
So I suppose my question to the board is, moving forward with public outreach, is there appetite to stop the public outreach? Because I hear a lot of concerns about what the public outreach might tell us, but we haven't heard anything. We've heard.
So let me try. So from my perspective, I don't want to halt the public outreach. I think I was trying to make a point that the public outreach is not. I think it is. If we, I was riffing off something that Clint said. If the public outreach is, hey, this is not the right set of amenities for this current environment. Let's see what we could do to scale down the public outreach before burning down $50,000. And I think we could. And I think we heard we could do it. Second, I think the message that I want ProStack to hear is, and the community here is, this is not defined that we're going to spend $700,000 or $800,000 or whatever the budget was. And in fact, I don't think we have enough play-like amenities in this town, right? And the town's doing pretty well, right? We've got a lot of new buildings, so we got a lot of new one-time revenue streams. And I would love to hear more from ProStack saying, I want, and I'm going to avoid the word playground, I want play amenities and bring them to us. And the town might not say yes, but, I think Sandy made a good point. If we went to you and said, we got an extra $700 to spend, what would you do? I'd flip it to you and say, what are the amenities does this town need? And if it's $700 for this park and $500 for this other park, and you want to rip and replace something that was built 20 years ago, I want to hear about it, right? Because that's exactly what I'd like the committee to do. And maybe we should have thought about that a little bit more in the work plan development, but I don't think it's not contrary to anything that's in the work plan, but it is, I am very respectful of the volunteers that we have in the committee, and I know you guys work hard and think about those ideas, and just know that at least I think the board, at least me specifically, but the rest of us would be very amenable to hearing about, different alternatives. And again, for the community, we, while yes, we have potentially earmarked something for next year related to this, we pivot all the time from things that are budgeted from an out year to make changes. And frankly, even if something was budgeted in this current year it still has to get approved. Even if something's budgeted in a current year, it still comes to this board and is approved. So just because you see something in a budget or something, quote, has been earmarked doesn't mean that it's been spent. So.
Okay. Thanks, Kevin. And Ken, my comments are not intended to shut down this process. I very much want to go forward with it. I'm just expressing some.
Yeah. And if we get to the point that after we've heard from the entire community and we've finished the outreach, then absolutely it makes sense if the answer is a resounding no to stop. It sounds like there was some presupposition of what the conclusions will be up here, and that was a bit concerning.
Understandable.
I want to add that I think a missing part of this, and based on one of the comments we heard earlier, is we kind of presupposed it with a name. It's been called Riverbend Park as part of what should have been an outreach for the northeast corner of Superior potential park playground amenity. Because if the geotech comes back, or if the community feedback is no, we don't want it in Riverbend, what's the alternative? I mean, I think if we acknowledge that this northeast corner north of Rock Creek needs some sort of playground type amenity, where else could it go? And I don't think we have that answer. I don't think the process is going to, as it's been laid out, I don't think this lends itself to an alternative location.
That was one of my follow-up questions, actually, for staff.
I stole it.
Has this only been 100% focused on Riverbend Park, or do we have alternatives that we've been looking at as well?
Just a quick map overview. There were some different areas that were talked about at ProStack's meeting that are, the park follows around here all the way over to 88. So there are some different sites that are being examined by our contractor, and she's going to bring back any comments on if there are potential opportunities in some of the other areas on this tract.
Will that information be available prior to the outreach beginning?
Yes, because the concept designs will have targeted areas where something could be placed.
But, in our budget for 2019, we earmarked $50,000 for this process and then $700,000 for construction in 2020. And the description, it's listed as the Riverbend Playground as a Parks and Rec project, and just as this project would involve public engagement, planning, design and construction of a new playground in the area of Riverbend Park. Currently, there is not a playground north of Rock Creek Parkway that is accessible for residents to use. The nearest playground in this part of town is located at Purple Park, south of Rock Creek Parkway. So 2019 is engagement and design. 2020 is construction. Obviously, 2020 depends on whether or not engagement is successful. And, I think ultimately, let's just let this phase of the process play out. We need to find out what the public wants, but, what we're doing here is we were being responsive to demand from the community saying we want a playground in this area. It's an unmet need in this area. So we budgeted it, and now let's go through the process and find out what the data tells us. And if people are opposed to it and it's a bad idea, then we reassess and we don't spend the $700,000 that's currently earmarked for 2020. But I certainly want to hear public comment tonight. So,
Personally, I'm supportive of moving forward with the public engagement process, but I guess my direction to staff, I want to be really careful in how we word these surveys when they go out, how we word the workshop so that it's not just there is a park coming, what play features do you want in it, but we have an opportunity to potentially put a park here. A, are you interested? B, if so, what sort of features would you want? Looking through the comments from the last ProStack meeting, it looked like a lot of the residents that came had some other ideas that we haven't yet talked about, like stocking the pond with fish or things like that. So I just want to make sure that we are open in how our survey goes out. My other concern, just looking at the timeline, so if we're doing the first workshop May 15th, the second June 1st, and then ProStack reviews on June 19th, I'm a little concerned that then sharing something with the public July 4th is pretty quick. And certainly I'll leave that up to you and what kind of turn time you can achieve. But I want to make sure that, again, we don't get to July 4th with, hey, we're presenting ideas, but actually the survey feedback isn't all that positive yet. So I guess my question would be, what is the urgency to get this out for that July 4th meeting? Or obviously it's the festival, but could that be delayed until Chili Fest perhaps to give more time to digest the results of the survey?
I think the timeline was developed around the conversations for the 2020 budget, and July 4th would give the group a chance to gather a little bit more feedback, revise the concept before making a recommendation based on the feedback from the residents to the board in time for the budget discussions.
I think that makes sense. In that case, I would just strongly encourage that for July 4th, it be presented in a similar manner as the potential rec center that we discussed last year, where it was, here's the amenities, but there still is a big question of, do we do this at all? Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything further before we do public comment?
Yeah, I have some more.
Ken, go ahead.
Specific questions on the slides. I think it's slide 4. So engagement opportunities, reaching out to the surrounding homes. Is that surrounding homes going to encompass the entire 450 plus homes within that area that is boxed in by McCaslin, 88th, and
ProStack talked about adjacent homes within 500 feet of the park was the discussion that we had.
And just to be 100% clear, we talked about door hangers, we talked about possible mailings. So what's going to those surrounding homes within the 500 feet?
Currently, the group has spoken about both options, and I'm working on a postcard just in case members aren't available to go door to door, or if the weather isn't great, just to have those two options available, whichever option the members choose.
Okay, so one of the things that Trustee Ryan spoke about earlier was being able to parse the data. I think that's going to be crucial to however we do collect. That was, I think, great for a Weldona survey a few years ago. My concern with reaching out to surrounding homes is if this amenity were to take place, it's to serve that entire area, not just the immediate area within 500 feet. So hitting all the homes that are north of Rock Creek Parkway, that are west of 88th, that are south of downtown Superior, and that are east of McCaslin, I think would be crucial to ensure that we're actually hearing from the entire served area.
Patrick Hammer, town staff. What we did with Wildflower Park is we specifically addressed all the homes adjacent to it to eliminate any confusion of whether people were or were not invited to participate. What I'm thinking we probably could do here is just a postcard blanket to everybody, and then maybe the initial outreach to the homes, which is what we did at Wildflower with ProStack, just to make sure that we could, as a committee, ensure that everybody had the opportunity, had the information to participate. We did run into some instances on Founders Park where we continued to hear from people, I wasn't notified, I wasn't notified, I wasn't notified. At that time, ProStack went door to door, and it did help with that process. So I think that was just a little bit of the background on this one, but we'd be happy to do postcards to everybody.
Yeah. And that's my biggest concern. I mean, I heard some great comments. I was at one of the ProStack meetings a few months ago about how this park probably better serves further residents that are further to the northeast than the people right around Riverbend. I think to make sure that those folks actually know this is coming to ensure, I mean, that's probably just as big of a target area as the folks right around Riverbend. So as long as we make sure that everyone is well aware of what's going on, that's my biggest concern in this.
On that topic, I would just add, while I recognize it takes a lot of resources to send postcards out, if there is an online survey anyway, I also think that should be open to other residents as well. Again, to Trustee Ryan's point, as long as we're caveating who lives where, so we can slice and dice that data later.
Yeah. The other pitfall, because as I read through this, my brain was going, how can we get to 2 or 3 months from now? And as I've seen so many times before, the board saying, man, I wish we had this data, and that's where things fall apart. My concern is if we somehow hear that Riverbend might be a no, but there's still a need, are we able to hear the need and track the need from the community that, yes, we need an amenity here, but no, not here in Riverbend? So do we know, is this something that stays on the radar? Do we know this is still a need, or does it fall off the radar?
And I think the activity that would really address that point would be our card storming activity at the more formal first engagement on May 15th. Where people are putting their ideas and grouping them into categories. And I think it'll be really easy to see once these cards are in those categories, how the cards are stacked.
I think the tough part about that is we're requiring people to be here at a very specific time, one day out of the entire summer versus through the survey process. If we happen to hit when people aren't there, it just limits it so much more, and we might be missing out on crucial data. Is there some way we can capture this through the survey?
Absolutely, and ProStack's discussed, I think, a handful of questions that are general in nature as far as demographics, and then also more specific with open-ended opportunities for participants to give their unbiased, open feedback, as well as mention specific amenities and features that could go into the areas that are identified by the contractor.
Okay. As long as we can track that, I think I'm good. So I'm ready for public.
All right, anything further before we do public comment? All right, offer an opportunity for public comment.
Again, Kara Noisy. I live at 1313 South Gibson Court. And I want to say that I'm just very pleased that this has at least warranted a little bit of discussion. I really do appreciate that from this board. Quite frankly, it seems as if a solution has been presented before the requirement was actually articulated. And it is important, I think, when I see dollars that have been allocated to hire a landscape artist to determine what kind of features could be placed, again, before even realizing what the community's requirement actually might be. Even the name Riverbend, like I said earlier, I think words do matter, and this project has been labeled the Riverbend Project, the playground project, and that in itself is a bit of a misnomer from our discussion, right? But I still contend that there is not sufficient studies on other potential areas, and I still think we're looking at this as a Riverbend or bust kind of situation. Although some of our discussion points, I think, appease some of my concerns there. I do think engagement's important, and I really do applaud the committee's efforts in trying to get the community's requirement. And I would just suggest that maybe some of that comes out to what do people need? Do they want a full-fledged playground like a Purple Park? There are going to be certain constraints, certainly with Riverbend, because of water and no parking and a bunch of other serious concerns. But maybe this is the time to plan that in some of these areas that are opening up on that side of Rock Creek Parkway. It might not be tangible today, but can this board build towards something within the next few years that would be like a Purple Park-like structure on the opposite side of Rock Creek? I don't know, it's just something I think that warrants a little bit of focus. I would certainly ask the community if they want a real playground or if they want stepping stone features, and if that really fits the bill. So I really do applaud you all for recognizing that as well. And then also, I do think location matters. It is a beautiful nature preserve, and I don't think any of us in the community that are adjacent to that area want to see that marred in any way. And I would also, again, emphasize the fact that there are 3 legitimate playgrounds within less than a quarter of a mile of each other. So I would really argue that you need to figure out where the location is needed. Again, you need the requirement. If the requirement's a playground, then you deduce where it should be built, instead of labeling Riverbend and making it work there. I just think that we have jumped forward to a solution before we ever understood the requirement.
Okay.
Questions for me?
Thank you for the
Thank you.
comments. Additional comments?
Hi, I'm Sarah, and I live on 1505 South Vona Court, and we are literally...
Sarah, could we get your last name, please?
Miller. We live literally across the street from the park. Again, I applaud the committee, and I applaud you guys for doing what you guys do. And she's going to be a lot more eloquent than I am, but I agree. I kind of feel like we put the cart before the horse. You know, we need to see if this is what is needed. And I've got prime age kids. I've got an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I would love a playground. However, this is already an established park. We go sledding there, blue herons land there, pelicans land there, cormorants are there. We've even seen muskrats. So it's an established park, whereas, you know, you brought up Wildflower Park and getting community engagement. It's not really apples to apples because it was either going to be a park or more homes were going to go in. So I'm kind of curious as to how this location got picked as the location when the town is being torn up at the end of Coal Creek, and west of 88th and south of 36. The town is already being torn up. Why not put a park there? Again, my kids could bicycle to it. They wouldn't be crossing any major streets. There are plenty of trails that go through the neighborhood that could get to that park. And there's already a sidewalk that goes behind Pitkin from the Pitkin Pond that would be accessible to that area. So that's kind of my question is, how did this location, because like Mr. Neil Shaw said, it's this whole area, and yet we're talking about this park that is already established, and we're thinking about possibly changing and ripping up.
Thank you.
Oh, that was the question.
We don't typically do
okay.
Q&A with.
Okay, so this is just public comment?
Yes.
Got it. All right, thank you.
You can state questions and we will circle back frequently and address those after everybody's going to go through their comments. So.
My name is Shane Mood, and I'm at 1191 East Riverbend Street. Thanks for giving us this opportunity to share our thoughts. I actually have a text from my wife because she's watching on Channel 8 somewhere, and she's far more eloquent than I, but I agree wholeheartedly with her. So what she wrote to me as she watched the dialogue that has been going on here, and it's to kind of piggyback what Sarah said, who's a good friend and neighbor of ours. So my wife, Debbie, said, Riverbend already is a park as it stands. It is well utilized by the community. Soccer, sledding, croquet, kites, fishing, golf, frog hunting, crawdads, sailboats, bike riding, dog walking, ice blocking, sledding. The natural setting allows for creative play and use by all ages. Imposed structure by nature dictates how it is used and constrains kids' creativity. And she put in parentheses actual research that actually supports this, which I agree. As a school teacher, the creativity of kids is really concerning and it's on the decline. So having a park that's already there without any physical structure is a really healthy thing for children. Developmentally important for them to have opportunities to play in as natural a setting as possible. Most play structures tend to be appropriate for limited age range of kids. So I agree with Debbie. I think that it's already a park, and I think that the structures that we do have in Rock Creek are fantastic, and there's nothing wrong with monkey bars and slides and things of that nature. Those are healthy for kids as well, but I think having a space that's already there that would cost $0 out of the budget of Superior to continue to maintain would be a really healthy thing for kids and their creativity.
Okay, thank you. Any additional public comment?
My name is Doug Carlisle. I live at 1300 South Gibson Court. And I want to say, I look at Riverbend Park, that area, and the demographics really don't support, in my opinion, a playground. We have very few kids in the area now. We did in the beginning, but we don't now. We have, and it doesn't look to me like, because of the price of the homes have outpriced young parents that have young kids that would use the park. The homes have outpriced that. I don't see that in the future happening. I certainly see the need for the parks down in, it would be to the east of Riverbend. There is a need down there, and I think someone had mentioned that we're building, or there's ground being torn up on west of 88. There will be ground torn up east of 88. Why not look at putting a park in there? You can put or a playground. You can put any type of playground in there that you want. But anyway, my thought is the demographics just do not support a park in Riverbend at this point.
Okay, thank you for the comments. Any additional comments? All right, thank you all for coming and making your comments. Any follow-up from the board?
So I think Sarah Miller, right? She raised a good point. And, you know, just for the board's recollection, back when we approved the Lanterns Lane development, one of the potential kind of solutions to that project was to have Coal Creek Drive terminate at Lanterns Lane, not connect through to Town Center, and then have that terminus be the little park, right? They had, in part of their concept, this climbing structure, you know, boulders or something like that, and it could be a possible park. At that point in time, the board decided not to approve it with an actual park, but also didn't approve it with the road going through. So it's kind of we don't necessarily know what's going to happen with Coal Creek Drive. There's the potential that Coal Creek Drive could continue on through to downtown Superior. It's possible that it stops there. If it stops there, I think probably now under the circumstances, it probably is unlikely to be a park, you know, based on just the developers already got approved plans to develop it as is. But, you know, that was one of the considerations. So it'll be interesting to see what the engagement process shows. And, you know, I think we still should continue to move forward with engaging with the public and seeing what people want. But I appreciate everybody's comments tonight, and thanks for coming and letting us know what you think.
And to clarify, it was the prior board that made that decision, right, Mark?
It was the prior board.
Just want to make sure. Was there public comment in favor of adding a park down there?
There was.
Okay, just want to make sure.
There was also public comment in favor of connecting Coal Creek through to downtown Superior. So, you know, all of these issues are really difficult because there's differences of opinion in many different directions on many different issues. So,
okay.
If I could just add on to what Mark said, one of the difficulties that ProStack has is not knowing what's going to happen north of Anderson. You know, in terms of the Toll Brothers, you know, what types of parks may they plan on putting? Because that's one of the things that ProStack's grappling with is, if not the Riverbend area, you know, what does the rest of this potential development look like? And it's difficult for the committee to sort of go through the engagement process here, not knowing where it's going to go, or having any visibility on what the Toll Brothers and Anderson development may ultimately look like. Although I will caution that, you know, even if Toll Brothers was going to put in a 20-acre park, it might be years out. And, you know, that piece of it is, again, not in our control. So there's these parts of it that, you know, none of us have the crystal ball that tells us when stuff's going to get built. And I think that is one of the things that they're grappling with, because, you know, I think there was a professed sort of desire for a park, this part of town, you know, whether it's at the terminus of Coal Creek or Riverbend, I don't know that we know. So I'm optimistic that we'll get some good feedback from the community, and that'll at least, you know, guide our decisions going forward.
Okay.
I have one further suggestion for how we structure the survey and the engagement. I would really like to see us separate out, is there a need in this area from, if so, what are the amenities you would like? And separate from all of that, what is the ideal location for it? I think if we could make sure that any survey encompasses all three parts of that, I think all three parts will be very valuable to know.
Okay. Anything further? Okay.
I just want to say one more thing for a correction. Like, the closest park isn't Purple Park. There's actually a park behind the pool that's a park, a playground, and there's also the school playground that's also closer to those residents. So I just wanted to make that correction when that was being read to us.
Okay, thanks. Okay, anything further? All right. Do we have good direction? Clear as ever?
Question.
Clear as mud. Okay. All right.
The applicant for Old Chicago did not show up, so we'll have to table that
Table
and
3C.
follow up with them. Yeah.
Okay.
Do we need to table it?
No, we can just bring it back when, yeah, there's no need to formally table it.
Meaning that?
We don't have to,
Can we
it doesn't have to.
Well, I'm just
Well, meaning, can we vote on it tonight? I think.
Yeah, oh, yeah, you can vote on it if you'd like. It's
Okay.
up to you. If you're prepared
I
to
would
vote on it.
just say that we're not sure what Old Chicago's is going to do until we speak to them. They may,
Yeah, why don't we table it? Let's give them an opportunity to
They may,
do
yes.
something
There's
different.
a chance that they
and-
could decide to withdraw this manager and ask for a different one, in which case then,
Which might, yes, let's
But
just table.
the reason why I asked the question is I generally don't like the idea of having anything coming up on our agendas and then having the party who is responsible for putting those items on the agenda not show up at a board meeting
I
and
suspect-
essentially
right,
be in
so
default.
So just to be clear, for the new board members, I think there's a motion coming, and if the motion is made and it's a second, then we'll vote on it. So, but I do not think I think it's a recommendation of council and the town manager to consider, and that's a recommendation, but it is the 7 of us that are making that determination. Fair?
The determination to vote or not?
So the determination of whether or not somebody's about to make a motion. And if somebody makes a motion, we should act on it.
Well, we haven't even really formally dug into 3C, so.
Well,
why don't we call up the agenda item then, just to be fair?
Okay.
And then start the discussion. I'm sorry, I wasn't following Trustee Ryan, what you said.
Well, we were deferring it, and I don't think some of us want it deferred.
my recommendation is to table it and let staff go back and speak to the applicant for the liquor license and bring it back.
I understand that's your recommendation. I'm not sure that I agree with that recommendation. And I'm not sure that others do either.
And just for the record, should you all vote to deny this, they can submit another one tomorrow, regardless of whether you vote to deny it or not. So I'm just throwing that out
With
there.
the same person?
No. Well, they could, but that'll just be denied. But they could use it, they could submit somebody else, so.
So Kevin, can you just clarify what were you trying to explain to the new board
It
members?
felt like we were about to defer it, and I'm not sure that that was the desire. I feel like I'm putting words in Mark's mouth. So you have anything additional to say?
Well, so
should we open this? I feel like we're treading on.
Yeah, should we just keep?
All right, let's cover item 3C. All right, we're now on item 3C.
Okay, so.
Which is there's approval of a manager change for Old Chicago.
So talking about item 3C, the Old Chicago manager change, there's just 2 issues that I have with this agenda item right now. Obviously, there's a potentially substantive issue to the request to approve the manager change. So that is one discrete issue. Under the circumstances, I would like to ordinarily have the opportunity to talk to the applicant who is coming before us, and then we can assess the facts based on the testimony that's presented to us in a public hearing. But number 2, just procedurally, I have a problem with an item being called up on our agenda and then an applicant not showing up at a town meeting. I think it shows a lack of respect to the town board and to the process. And, as a practicing attorney, if I was responsible for getting something on the docket and I didn't show up for a court, I would be held in contempt. And my client would be done a disservice. So I think that there is merit to denying a request, essentially by default, if it's something that, wouldn't pass through on a consent agenda, which this obviously is not because it's been pulled off the consent agenda. And that's the risk that you run anytime that you apply for anything before the town board, even if it's going to go on the consent agenda ordinarily, that there's the opportunity that a town board member may pull it off the agenda. And if you're not here, then you run the risk of it getting denied because you're not in the audience to answer any questions. I'm not suggesting necessarily that we do that, but I thought it was appropriate to at least have the discussion to see what the board thinks about a situation like that. I'm, generally fine with tabling it and moving forward if we want to go down that direction, but I could also get behind a vote on it tonight.
I don't disagree with anything you said, Mark. Matt, has there been any discussion with Old Chicago today that may have led them to believe that we wouldn't necessarily discuss this tonight, or that there could have been any confusion at all whatsoever?
No.
Did anyone successfully make contact with Old Chicago today?
Phyllis made contact with them.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
I made contact with Stephanie at their headquarters, not with the manager.
Locally,
She said
okay.
he would be here.
Okay. Okay.
That was my understanding. He would
Okay.
be here.
Thank you for that.
But we also haven't heard, I mean, we have no reason, we have no understanding why they didn't show up either, right?
Yeah, from my perspective, I mean, I agree with what Mark said, and from I like the way you've identified the two issues. There's one substantive issue that potentially could have been explained as an administrative error or an oversight. But the fact that the applicant didn't come to, I don't want to presume anything, so I have no idea why, but we have something that has been, we have an attestation that is incorrect. And so given the incorrect attestation and nobody to help me understand why it's incorrect, if somebody wants to make a motion, I'll happily vote on it. Not happily, vote on it. But if somebody had a compelling reason why we should defer, I'd be willing to hear that as well. I just felt like it was worthy of it. We all spent time today thinking about this, and it would have been nice if the applicant had, to Mark's point, been respectful enough to either explain why they weren't showing up or have shown up.
So while I'm disappointed by the lack of respect shown in someone no showing, I would prefer to follow the recommendation of our town attorney and town manager, give them a chance at our next meeting to explain what happened, and then go from there. Depending on what that explanation is, I may or may not be sympathetic, but I'd like to at least hear them out.
I sort of concur with Laura in the sense that, you know, it might have been some extenuating circumstances. However, the other substantive issue isn't going to change.
Yep.
You know, and I'm a little confused. This thing's dated November. You know, it's 5 months since this thing was put together. I'm not sure why we're seeing it now. So just a question. I mean, yeah, it's their thing. So I don't know why that.
He was supposed to go in to get fingerprints, and he didn't get them until later. And now the sheriff's office doesn't do fingerprinting for us. We have this new process where they have to go in and do it digitally. Then it's sent to CBI, and it took them that long to get the fingerprints done.
This is the delay is caused by the state.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for that. That's okay.
Okay. I appreciate the discussion. I'm more with Laura to just take advice of staff and attorney to table this. We, you know, yes, if we were a court of law, I agree we'd probably go down, but we're not. You know, we're the town board, and I'd like to at least. We're not in a rush tonight to, you know, to approve or deny this. So I'm fine tabling it to hear what else they might have to say in the interim or do in the interim.
So just a confirmation, he cannot act as a manager until such time he's approved?
Well, he's probably already acting as the manager. The liquor code allows that. So he's probably already acting. I don't know the answer to that, but he's probably already acting as the manager.
That would be my understanding. I don't know for sure. So.
If we don't approve it tonight, would that need to desist until?
No, he will act as a manager until you deny it.
And if we deny it, he'd have to stop.
Yes.
Could he
But they need
reapply?
a manager, so they would have to get someone else to come in and do it. So
And if we deny it and then they present different information or something else, we could change our minds.
Well, I think here's why I recommend that you table it, because we don't have an explanation. We have a pretty sloppy answer to that question, honestly, but we haven't had the opportunity to ask them the questions, which would basically say, first of all, we don't know if those are convictions. They're arrests, but arrests on CBI reports don't mean convictions, and unfortunately, CBI reports are not as extensive as we would like. Sometimes they have the results of those arrests, and sometimes they don't. All of those charges could have been dismissed. I don't know the answer to that.
So there's an open case in Adams County filed on May 17th, 2018.
Right.
Case number 2018-2 T 4914. It is open. It has not been dismissed. It is pending. And the question on the application asked about convictions, but also, do you have any charges pending?
True. That's true.
And
I completely agree with you.
Under oath.
I'm sorry?
Under oath.
Under penalty of perjury, yes.
Yes.
Right.
I-
So that's why I'm waiting on Mark to, I mean, it's pretty unambiguous.
So,
Go ahead.
so Mike, I don't disagree with where you guys are going with this, and I actually do agree with this is where I would want to go. My concern is what we are doing to Old Chicago right now, making this decision, and them not having someone to act as a manager tomorrow morning, if that were to occur.
I'm on the Old Chicago website. General manager, it's him right now.
Yeah.
And
It's
that
on their
makes sense.
website. Yeah.
They are allowed under the liquor code to start acting as the manager prior to approval. It's sort of like under the liquor code, they come in and file a renewal application.
Sure.
They
They can keep
They
operating.
keep operating
Yeah.
until you actually deny a renewal application. They will keep operating while you're considering a renewal application.
Sure.
And that's the way the liquor code has always worked. So the purpose of this is so that someone does not need to stop serving while you're considering this.
So I think everybody knows kind of what I feel about provably false statements and respect for the process. I am sensitive to, a business in the town of Superior. And, under the circumstances, I don't think that necessarily Old Chicago would necessarily know about something like this. And if they have a manager who is not being forthright with us, that manager may also not be forthright with Old Chicago. And I am willing to give them the 2 weeks until our next meeting to put this back on the agenda. But if they don't show up, my recommendation is going to be to move to deny the application immediately. And they should understand that we're being gracious in giving them a continuance under the circumstances, because we're not under any obligation to do so. So I guess I'm open to that, just because I value them as a citizen in our community and as a business. But I'm not happy about the manager change. So that's but I'm willing to reconsider.
I'm frustrated by this because I'm personally torn, because I have personally asked this board to not follow the these silly Roberts rules where somebody makes a motion and it's second and we act upon it. Yet I'm really tempted to do so, despite the fact that we do not seem to have consensus of the board to deny the application. Or, I don't know if there's consensus to deny or approve. There appears to be consensus to give them 2 weeks. I don't want to, but I'm extraordinarily frustrated by this.
So to me, these are two separate questions. Just to be clear, my point earlier was I did not want to deny simply based on the fact that the manager did not show up. When it comes to a question of whether this manager should be in that position, Kevin, I mean, I would not be interested in approving this manager, given the falsehoods and given the history.
Question for Kendra and Matt. If Old Chicago tomorrow morning finds himself without a general manager that has passed this, can they continue to operate and sell beer and spirits? Yes. So they are out a single person, but they can continue to do business as usual.
What they should do is just immediately designate another manager tomorrow morning. And then they'll come to you with another manager application, and then you'll act on it.
Although, based on what we've seen with just the CBI turnaround, it could be 6 months before we get another applicant. So this
is a brand new system that the state has imposed on us. We can't run our own fingerprints anymore.
Right.
So we have to wait 6 months for the state to run fingerprints.
But in the meantime, they have an assistant manager designated, and they can operate business as usual, but we won't have the current manager, Mr. Menning, as the manager anymore because he's been officially rejected by us.
Right.
Well, let's just give me another minute here, Mark. Does anybody else have an opinion? An opinion? I want to just continue the dialogue so you don't feel like a vote is maybe forced upon you. Is there anybody else have an opinion that a provable fact that was incorrectly stated on an application under penalty of perjury should be overlooked or could otherwise be explained, given the materiality of this provable fact? So I think we have a few of us, I don't want to speak, that are disappointed enough. So we're not, does anybody else have a thought around that?
Well, my thought on it is that the applicant has the burden of proof of explaining away anything that is inconsistent or incorrect in the application. I mean, number one, they're certifying under penalty of perjury that everything's true.
Right.
And then if there's something that is not, and then they don't show up, I'm sorry, you haven't met your burden.
I clearly agree with you, Mark. I was trying to get other people to weigh in on something.
Now, given the dialogue here, I'm more inclined to now take action because I think we know where this is headed 2 weeks from now. And given the fact that they can, this individual will be denied, they will appoint someone else to go through the process. I think that's where we would get to, whether it's tonight or 2 weeks from tonight. And given what we're seeing, I just as soon get there tonight.
Okay.
Just a question at a process, so with respect to a potential vote here, how much of this gets communicated back to Old Chicago so they're cognizant of the reason and the background? I mean, the information that we have is significant, but I'm not clear that gets shared with them.
We can certainly share. I mean, I think, among us, we will figure out who shares this with Old Chicago.
Okay, because I think that arguably they should have come across this on their own, but clearly they did not. So I'd love to they understand this because I think this is their business.
True, and again, the actual existence of the DUIs is not preclude him.
Fair
so
enough.
They may have already known about this, and maybe they assumed that this person correctly filled out the IHR. You're right, but I'm just saying at least the existence alone of a DUI wouldn't preclude
Agreed.
this person.
I would agree with that too.
Understood.
Right.
Yep.
So,
But
I think it's the inconsistency.
But the question didn't just ask for the existence of DUIs, it asked for any pending charges.
Sure.
There is a pending charge for a DUI,
Right.
which is a matter of public record right now, and that was not disclosed to us, and it was discovered, on our own, and then it's verifiable right now. You can pull up the docket report through the Colorado court system.
Right.
And it's an open case, it's not closed. Which means, it could be dismissed, but it's a pending charge.
Well, further, there was misleading statements that there were DUIs about 6 years ago, but to then omit this is still willfully misleading. There's multiple problems here.
Right, and ultimately, we as the licensing authority for liquor licenses and in approving manager changes, we have to make judgment calls about character, reputation, and this is the sort of thing that if we don't feel that the person is of the type of character to get the privilege of having the license attached in the manager position, we can deny liquor licenses, we can deny these assignments of manager positions. So, and that's what we should do.
I agree with you on that. I just want to clarify. It is, from my perspective, it is not a result of a charge or a pending charge or a previous. It is, to me, number one, the misrepresentation on the application under penalty of perjury, and number two, the fact that they did not show up. So, for those reasons, and if there wants to be, if they would choose to reapply even with the same manager, and there is if there was something, the car broke down and his cell phone is out, okay, come back in 2 weeks and explain that. But, he didn't fill out the application, some some admin did or whatever, I'm all ears, but for now, I'm prepared to vote.
Okay.
Well, just to clarify, Kevin, they can't come back in 2 weeks if we vote for this and vote now.
I suppose they could. I think Kendra's clarification was they will come back with a new.
Not in 2 weeks. They'll have to reapply throughout the entire process.
They have 30 days to, so basically they can get a new manager tomorrow. They have 30 days to come to us and say, here's our new manager.
And we can always reconsider a decision that we've made in the event that something new comes to light and we were mistaken. So if they come in 2 weeks and they say, hey, this is why, what the assumptions that you were operating under at the April 22nd meeting were incorrect.
Mistaken identity.
Right. Sure.
Okay.
Let's call a motion.
With that, I'll entertain a motion.
So I'll make a motion to deny the approval of a new general manager for Old Chicago of Colorado.
Okay, motion by Mayor Pro Tem Lace, second by Trustee Ryan. All those in favor? Okay, that passes unanimous.
Well, like I said, staff will communicate with Old Chicago tomorrow and see where we go from here.
All right. With that, we are done with the regular agenda. Are we good going into executive session? Do we want to take a break before we? No? Okay. Okay. All right. Quick break. Executive session.
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Trustee Skrzynski.
I'm sorry, we need to read the whole thing.
I'm sorry. Thank you. All right, we're on item number 6, executive session to hold a conference with the town's special counsel to receive legal advice on specific legal questions pursuant to CRS 24640224B regarding oil and gas issues, and to hold conference with the town's attorney to receive legal advice on specific legal questions pursuant to CRS 24640224B regarding ongoing litigation. Do I have a motion to go into executive session?
I'll make a motion.
Trustee Skrzynski, second by Trustee Lish. All those in favor? All right, passes unanimous. We're now in executive session.